Okay, so now that we have our project set up, it's time to start creating classes, and we're going to start with our character class. Now, if you're coding along in Writer, you can create your C++ classes directly in Writer, which is my recommended method. Here in the source folder, we have Crash Course, at least that's what my project is called, and I can right-click here, go to Add, and choose Unreal Class, and I'd like to create a character class. And I want to keep my project structure organized. So in Crash Course, I'm going to have a characters folder. I'm going to use the base folder setting public so that we have our headers go to the public folder and CPP files go to the private folder, which will be created once we make this class. And both my player character and my enemy character classes are going to have a common ancestor. And because I called this project Crash Course, I'm going to prefix my C++ classes with CC for Crash Course. So I'm going to first make a CC underscore base character. So this will be the base class for my characters. I'll go ahead and create this class. And the first thing I'm going to do is just reorganize the header file just a bit, removing what I don't need. For instance, I don't need this bottom public section. I'm not going to use tick or setup player input component here. I'm going to remove the comment above begin play. We know what begin play does here, and above the constructor. And I'm going to go to the CPP file and remove these comments as well. I do not believe that they provide us with any value. I'm going to set B can never tick to false because we don't need our base character class to tick. I'm going to remove these two functions at the bottom, and actually we don't need begin play either. So I'm going to remove that from the header file and the CPP file. But there is one thing I want to add to the base character constructor right now, and that's the following line. First, I'm going to call getMesh to get that skeletal mesh component that all characters inherit. And I'm going to access visibility-based animtick option and set this equal to eVisibility-based animtick option, always tick pose and refresh bones. This is the setting I want, particularly for some of the mechanics we'll be creating later involving anim notifies that depend on the locations of the bones on our skeleton. This is for triggering hitboxes, for causing damage and such. So I'm going to have a comment here explaining why we have this. I'm going to say tick and refresh bone transforms, whether rendered or not, for bone updates on a dedicated server. So when we trigger hitboxes from animations, they'll work on a dedicated server. Now this is off by default as an optimization. And if you want to keep that off and you still want to trigger hitboxes from your animations on a dedicated server, you'd have to go about things a little differently. For this project, this is fine. Now that we have our base character class, I'd like to create the player character based on this. And later we'll have our enemy character based on this as well. Now, I don't plan on instantiating an actual object from the base character class. It's designed to be derived from. And when that's the case, you can add abstract to the U class just to ensure that it cannot be directly instantiated in the game or the editor. This is designed to be inherited from. So now that we have the base class, let's create the character class based on it. And it's going to go straight in to our characters folder here. So I'm going to add a new Unreal class, but this time select all classes and search for CC underscore base character. And this class will be called CC underscore player character. So I'm going to go ahead and create this class. So in this video, we're not going to add a whole lot to the class just yet, but we will set it up so that it's designed to be controlled by a human player. Now, I'm not going to use setup player input component in this class. We're going to set our inputs up through the player controller. So all we need for now is the constructor. I'm going to delete everything except the constructor and go into the CPP file and remove the bottom three functions, leaving the constructor, and remove those comments. And I'm going to set ticking to false here, as we don't need to tick, and we're ready to set some things up here in the character class. Now, for now, I just want to add a camera and a spring arm component. And these are going to be in the private section. and we'll expose them to the Unreal Engine editor with Visible Anywhere. So I'm going to add a U property first with Visible Anywhere. I don't need exposure to the event graph, but we can put them in a category if we like, such as camera. And the first component is going to be our spring arm component. We're going to use TObjectPointer for our member variable pointers, as is current best practice. And it's going to be a U spring arm component. We're going to add a forward declaration here. Writer allows me to simply select that and it'll forward declare it at the top there. And I'm going to call this camera boom. That's our spring arm component. And we're also going to have a camera component with the same U property. These can both be in category camera. So this will be a TObjectPointer of type U camera component. We'll call this follow camera. Sort of taking on the naming convention from the third person template project. And we'll just go ahead and forward declare this as well at the top there. So we need to construct these in our constructor, take the opportunity to set some default values in the constructor as well. So first, we'll create these components, starting with the camera boom. We'll say camera boom, create default subobject, U spring arm component. We'll get that header included, and its name will simply be camera boom. No need for the text macro in these. These are F names, which do not benefit from the text macro. Now, I'm going to set this up to the root component. We can use the getter for it, get root component, instead of accessing it directly, just in case they make the root component variable private in the future. We can set the target arm length. There is no current getter for it in 5.6, so we have to access it directly. And I'm going to set our target arm length to 600. And I'm going to set use pawn control rotation to true for our camera boom. Now we can set up our follow camera using create default subobject, U camera component. We'll call this follow camera. And we'll set up our attachment to the camera boom, specifying its static socket name, and use pawn control rotation will be false for the follow camera. It's going to follow the camera boom. Now that we've set up these two components, I'm just going to set a few properties here in the constructor. Some developers like to set some of these things on the character blueprint directly. I'm going to set them all here so they're easily visible in text format in case you want to refer to them. First, I'm going to call getCapsuleComponent and call initCapsuleSize, specifying a radius of 42 and a half height of 96. I'm also going to explicitly set the following booleans to false: buse controller rotation pitch, buse controller rotation yaw, and buse controller rotation roll. I want those all false. And then I'm going to set some properties on the movement component with getCharacterMovement. I'm first going to set borient rotation to movement to true so that our character rotates in the direction of movement. I'm going to set its rotation rate for the yaw to about 540. I'm going to set the jump Z velocity to 500. I'm going to set air control. I'm going to set max walk speed to 500. We'll set the min analog walk speed to 20. And we'll set braking deceleration walking to 2000. And braking deceleration falling to 1500. A lot of this is pretty much arbitrary, as these are values you can always tweak when testing. I'm just putting them here in the CPP file so you can see them in the Git commit if you want the exact same values that I have. Now that we have our base character class and our player character, we can launch the Unreal Engine editor and create our character blueprint from these classes. And we'll be doing that next. For now, we can go ahead and stop the Unreal Engine editor. I could do it from here in Writer. I can also open the editor and close it directly. And it's always a good idea to at least make sure we can successfully compile before we move on. So I have a successful compile. In the next video, we'll create our character blueprint based on CC player character. Great job, and I'll see you soon.